Okay, so it is January 17th, 2026. And if you've looked at pretty much any news feed on the planet today, you are seeing images that, frankly, feel impossible.
They really do.
We're talking about European troops, German, French, Swedish, deploying to nuke Greenland. The operation is called Arctic Endurance.
And they aren't there to fight a typical adversary from the East. They're there to deter an annexation attempt by their biggest ally.
By the United States.
Yeah.
It's a surreal moment.
Completely. We are watching the fracturing of the NATO alliance in real time. And it's all centered on this island that, most people think of as just a big white shape on a map.
Right, or a melting ice sheet in a climate change report.
Exactly. But right now, Greenland is the flashpoint for what analysts are calling the ice curtain.
The ice curtain. And the headlines are flying tariffs, ultimatums, this new Donroe Doctrine.
It's a lot to keep up with.
It is. But we're not here to just read the ticker tape. We want to understand why. Why is the world's most powerful military alliance tearing itself apart over an island with a population smaller than a football stadium?
Well, to get that, you have to look way past just the events of this month.
Right.
You have to look at the deep history of the people who've lived there, the geological lottery that put all these rare minerals under the ice.
And it's really complex, almost family relationship between Denmark and Greenland.
That's a huge part of it.
So we've got a fascinating stack of sources here. We've got paleo history, Danish colonial records, geological surveys on, uranium and magnets.
And, of course, the latest analysis on this 2026 crisis.
Exactly. So our mission today is to really unpack this ice curtain.
And I think if we do this right, you'll see this isn't some sudden crisis. It's a collision of history and geology and strategy that has been building for centuries.
Okay, let's do it. Let's start with the land itself. I think there's this common misconception that Greenland has just always been inhabited by the Inuit. A single continuous line of history.
That is the common view, yes. But the archaeology tells a much, much more dramatic story. Greenland is actually what historians call a turnstile of civilizations.
Turnstile.
Yeah, it's a place where cultures arrived, they struggled, they adapted, and then, in several cases, they completely vanished.
Vanished, like just gone.
With very few traces.
Yeah.
So let's go back 4,500 years to the Saquak culture.
Okay.
For a long time, we just assumed they were the ancestors of modern Inuit or Native Americans.
Yeah.
But in 2010, researchers sequenced the genome of a 4,000-year-old individual they named Inuk.
Yeah.
And here's where it gets really interesting. The DNA showed he wasn't related to modern Inuit at all. His closest genetic relatives, the Chukchi and Koryak peoples of Siberia.
Wait, hold on. So a totally separate migration all the way from Siberia across the top of North America to Greenland.
A completely separate branch of the human family tree.
All right.
And they survived there for thousands of years. They had this small tool tradition, tiny, sharp little blades. They live in skin tents in Disco Bay, surviving on caribou and seals.
But they were missing something, right?
They didn't have whaling gear. They were living right on the edge. And then around 800 BCE, the climate cooled just a little bit, and they disappeared.
That's haunting. Just gone. But they weren't the last ones before the modern Inuit arrived.
No, not at all. Next came the Dorset culture, the Tunit in Inuit oral history.
And these guys are even more of a mystery.
A mystery wrapped in an enigma. They lived there from about 800 BCE all the way to 1300 CE. But here's the kicker. They survived that whole time without bows and arrows.
What?
And without dog sleds.
How do you even survive in the Arctic without dog sleds? That feels like rule number one.
It's incredibly difficult. You're talking hand-pulled sleds, ice hunting. But they left behind these beautiful, haunting, tiny carvings of bears and humans. It points to this very deep spiritual life. But like the Saquak, they were replaced. Around 1200 CE, the Thule people arrived.
And these are the direct ancestors of modern Greenlanders, the Kalaallit.
Correct.
Yeah.
And the reason the Thule succeeded where everyone else failed is what archaeologists call the technological package.
The full kit.
The full kit. They brought the dog sled for mobility. They brought the umiak and the kayak for whaling on the open sea.
Yeah.
They had toggle harpoons.
Ah, the harpoons.
This allowed them to hunt the massive bowhead whales, which meant they had a huge surplus of food and fuel that the Dorset never had. It let them colonize the entire coastline.
So it was a technology disruption. The dog sled and the toggle harpoon were the killer apps.
They were the difference between surviving and truly thriving.
Okay, so at the same time the Thule are spreading out, another group shows up. The Vikings?
The Norse, Eric the Red.
We all know the story. Gets exiled from Iceland, finds a green fjord, calls it Greenland to trick people into coming. A classic marketing scam.
It was a bit of a scam, yeah.
Yeah.
But the sources point out something really fascinating about the Norse settlements. We sort of picture them just struggling to farm sheep in the cold.
Right.
But the new analysis shows it wasn't just a farm. It was a walrus economy.
A walrus economy.
You were there for the ivory. Walrus tusks were a huge luxury good in medieval Europe.
For what? Chess sets and things?
Chess sets, church carvings, you name it. That was their main export. That's how they paid for iron and timber from Europe. But the colony collapsed in the 15th century. And it wasn't just the cold.
So what happened?
It was two things. First, the market crashed. Portuguese traders started bringing in African elephant ivory. It was bigger, it was higher quality. The price of walrus ivory just tanked. Second, and this is key, was cultural rigidity. The Norse refused to adopt Inuit technology.
They wouldn't learn from the locals.
Wouldn't use toggle harpoons, wouldn't dress in the same furs. They clung to their European identity and
Well, they killed them. Wow.
Yeah.
Adapt or die.
Exactly.
So the Norse vanish, and Greenland becomes this kind of closed-off Danish territory for centuries.
Right. Starting with a missionary, Hans Age, in 1721, Denmark established a complete monopoly. The Royal Greenland Trading Department, the KGH, controlled everything.
It sounds very paternalistic.
Extremely. The idea was to protect the Inuit from the outside world, while of course extracting profit.
Of course. But then we get to 1953. This seems like a massive turning point in all the sources. Greenland goes from being a colony to being a county of Denmark.
Yes. After World War II, the UN was pushing for decolonization, so Denmark's solution was to integrate Greenland. But this led to the G50 and G60 policies.
Yeah.
It was forced modernization.
What did that look like on the ground?
It meant moving people from their small traditional settlements into these concrete apartment blocks in towns like Nuuk. It meant pushing the Danish language. They called it Danification.
And I'm reading here the result was, well, physical health improved, better hospitals, less TB.
Yes.
But the social cost was just devastating.
It was a collective trauma. A loss of identity, alienation, this feeling of being a second-class citizen in your own home. But, and this is absolutely crucial for understanding 2026, it also created deep family ties.
The Danish uncle.
Right. After 300 years, most Greenlanders have some Danish ancestry. The two nations are literally family. So when the U.S. comes in and offers to buy Greenland, it's not seen as a real estate deal.
It's seen as trying to buy your relatives.
Exactly. It's deeply personal.
That context changes everything. Okay, let's pivot to the hard power. Why now? Why is the U.S. so obsessed with this island in 2026?
It really comes down to two things, physics and geology.
Okay, physics first. The Golden Dome.
This is the Pacific Space Base. It
Right.
used to be called Thule Air Base. It houses a very specific radar, the AN/FPS-132.
And that radar does what?
It covers the blind spot. It's the one thing that can see ballistic missiles coming over the North Pole from Russia or China. If you lose that radar, you are blind until it's too late.
So it's the tripwire, the eyes of U.S. missile defense.
The absolute core of it. And it's also the western pillar of the GIUK gap, Greenland, Iceland, UK. That's the choke point where NATO hunts for Russian submarines trying to get into the Atlantic.
Okay, so that's the defense angle. Now, geology, the cold rush. Greenland is sitting on a treasure chest, isn't it?
It is. The U.S. is desperate to break China's monopoly on rare earth elements.
China controls something like 80% of the processing, right?
About that, yeah. And Greenland has these massive deposits. You've got Kvanefjeld and Tambries,
Kvanefjeld is the big one?
potentially the world's second largest rare earth deposit. But it's complicated. It also contains uranium.
Right, and the Greenlandic government has been very hesitant to mine it because of that.
Understandably. But for the U.S., these minerals are non-negotiable. They're essential for F-35 fighter jets, for electric vehicles. The logic in Washington is simple. If we don't secure these, Chinese state-owned companies will.
Which brings us to the trigger. January 2026, the Donroe Doctrine.
This is the pivotal moment. It comes right after a U.S. Special Forces operation in Venezuela that captured President Maduro. The administration then pivots north.
And they reinterpret the Monroe Doctrine.
They dust it off and reinterpret it for the 21st century. It's no longer just about keeping Europe out of the Americas. It's about asserting U.S. preeminence over the entire hemisphere, all the way to the Arctic.
And the quote from the president is stark. If we don't do it, Russia or China will. It's framed as a defensive move.
A security vulnerability, that's the term they used. The U.S. demanded the acquisition of Greenland. And when Denmark and Greenland refused,
The Prime Minister Mute Agid's famous line, "We are open for business, not for sale."
a great line. But after that, the U.S. weaponized trade.
The tariffs, This part is just wild. A 10% tariff on your own allies.
Starting February 1st on Denmark, the UK, Germany, France. And it escalates to 25% by June. The justification is that they're failing to, quote, remunerate the U.S. for their defense.
It's an economic shockwave designed to force a sale.
That's the goal.
And the European reaction wasn't to fold, it was Operation Arctic Endurance.
Which brings us right back to those impossible images we started with. European troops landing in Nuuk, a military standoff between allies.
But we have to remember the perspective from Nuuk itself.
Absolutely, because Greenland isn't just a strategic pawn. It's a country with a parliament with its own ambitions. But they're in a very tough spot economically.
It's what the sources call the economic trap.
Right. Greenland gets a block grant from Denmark that covers about half of its government budget.
And their economy is almost entirely based on one thing.
One thing. Fish. 90% of their exports are prawns and halibut. It's a total monoculture.
So if the U.S. applies those tariffs to Greenlandic fish,
It crushes their economy overnight. So you have this terrible dilemma. Polls show 56% of Greenlanders want independence. But that support drops below 45% if it means a lower standard of living.
so the U.S. is squeezing that exact pressure point.
Precisely. But they might have underestimated the political will. The slogan, "Nothing about us without us," is incredibly powerful there.
And you're seeing symbols of resistance like the Greenlandic flag, the Erfelis put, flying everywhere.
And Greenlandic being spoken defiantly in the Danish parliament. It's a real assertion of identity.
There's a quote here from Sarah Olsvig, chair of the Inuit Circumpolar Council, that really just stopped me in my tracks. She said, "There is no such thing as a better colonizer."
That is the core of it. That's the indigenous perspective. The choice for them isn't, do we want to belong to Denmark or the U.S.? The goal is self-determination. They don't want to swap a distant uncle in Copenhagen for a new landlord in Washington.
It's amazing when you frame it that way. You have this 19th century territorial ambition from the U.S., this kind of manifest destiny, buying land.
Clashing head-on with 21st century indigenous sovereignty.
That's the perfect way to put it. It's a clash of eras. The might of the U.S. military-industrial complex against a nation of 57,000 people who have survived the Arctic for 1,000 years.
Yeah.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, the situation is, it's a deadlock. Troops are in Nuuk, the tariffs are looming, and all the while the ice is melting, revealing the very resources everyone wants.
And I think the question you should walk away with is this. In a world that's going back to great power competition, can a small nation actually maintain its autonomy?
Or does geology and geography, the rare earths under your feet and the missile paths over your head, does that make neutrality simply impossible?
A sobering thought for a cold January.
That's it for this deep dive into the ice curtain. Thanks for listening and stay curious.